Hey, what's going on, you guys? So it's Adam the Science Tutor, and today we're going to be talking about type 1 diabetes. It's also referred to as juvenile diabetes, but this is no longer really used because there are some cases where people are getting it outside of their juvenile ages. So it's an autoimmune disorder, and it's affecting primarily the pancreatic beta cells. So these beta cells are found in the pancreas. We don't really know, or there's not enough research out to give us an exact cause or reason why, but it's partly genetic. It affects about 1.25 million Americans, about 5%. And there are different types. So type 2 is the most commonly taught because it's the most, more people are affected with type 2, but we're going to be talking about type 1 today. It's medicated with insulin, and a common test to help figure out your blood glucose levels over a 6-month span is an A1C test. And the beta cells are damaged, thus we have a deficiency in insulin. So insulin and glucagon are what we're going to talk about first before we dive into diabetes type 1 to begin. So it's stimulated by eating. So insulin, think of insulin as the good times. We're going to store a lot of energy, so we're storing glucose, and we're storing these things for fasting and for our times of starvation. So it's going to stimulate our triglyceride synthesis and our protein synthesis so that we can use these things to either grow in size, get stronger, or grow and put fat on, but we're storing energy. We're storing glucose for use in later times. So these are going to be coming from the islets of Langerhans. They're beta cells, and these are found on the pancreas. The insulin is going to inhibit glucagon. And so most cells cannot access glucose without insulin. So this is going to be very important. So if our body does not have insulin, we cannot process or we cannot utilize the glucose, so our body will be energyless. So that's very dangerous. So if we do not have insulin, our body will essentially be in a starving state. So glucagon, it's stimulated by sympathetic hormones and low blood glucose levels. And it's going to glucagon's going to come from alpha cells, which is about 20% of the cells in the pancreas. And so I said most cells cannot access glucose without insulin, but the brain is one of those cells, or brain is one of the organs, and the brain cells are not affected without insulin. It's insulin independent. So it's insulin independent, the brain is. And that's good because during starvation times, we don't lose processes in the brain. It's very important. So these are my little pancreas I drew. So this is going to be a normal person's pancreas and how it works with insulin. So a normal person's blood sugar should be ranging around 80%. And here's our person. We're going to be able to eat a donut. So if we eat a donut, our beta cells, if you guys remember, beta cells create the insulin, and our beta cells are going to release insulin because we are eating, so we're got stimulated by the food and the glucose, or the increase in glucose in the blood. So we're going to increase our insulin. So our beta cells is going to release insulin so that we could go through, and we're eating a donut, it's really fatty, so we're going to probably have triglyceride synthesis. So depending on what we're eating, depends on where these glucose molecules are going to go. So we're going to store our glucose in as triglyceride synthesis, or triglycerides. Then after we have a good eat, we're going to go to sleep because we get tired after we eat. And our body's right now fixed on storing, so the insulin is allowing our body to utilize the glucose in the blood to store it in the form of triglycerides or protein. Our guy's sleeping, so we're now in a fasting state. So how do we keep our blood sugar at 80? We're going to have to use glucagon, so our alpha cells are going to increase glucagon, and our glucagon is going to break off glucose for our body to use. So insulin is for storing, glucagon is for fasting. And this is a constant cycle so that we can maintain a blood sugar of concentration of about 80. And this is not going to always be 80, but it's on a scale. So it goes up and down, kind of like a plane. As long as it doesn't crash, you are good. So this is normal. This is a normal pancreas function. So it's going to be, your blood sugar should be around 80%. But with diabetes, type 1 diabetes, your beta cells are not working, and therefore there's going to be a lot of issues. So we don't have insulin for storing, So our body's essentially going to be in a constant fasting state or a constant starvation state. So let's look more in depth here. So type 1, we have a reduction of insulin. We have no insulin being produced because our body's an autoimmune disorder. Our body is attacking itself. It's destroying the insulin cells. And so therefore our glucose stays in the blood because it has nowhere to go. It cannot be utilized because we don't have insulin. The only glucose that can be utilized is going to the brain. So it's extremely dangerous. And as a result of having less insulin, we're going to have less glucagon as well. So let me see what I'm writing here. So yeah, the insulin, pretty much our insulin allows our cells of the body to utilize the glucose. So the glucose stays in our blood. That's going to lead to metabolic acidosis and other things that are very dangerous. So it's essentially like our body's in a starvation mode because we cannot utilize this energy or this glucose. So our body doesn't even feel like it has the glucose, which is crazy. So glucose will then exit through our body through urine, and this is going to be polyuria, so we're going to have more urine than normal, and polydipsia, we're going to be more thirsty than normal. These are two symptoms that you might be a type 1 diabetic. And then the glucose, the excess glucose will probably go to the brain because it's insulin independent. And then what else happens to our body? Well, we're going to increase fatty acid metabolism. So we're going to lose weight. We're going to lose our fat. Our fat is going to be used for glucose, but we still cannot use that glucose that our body is making. Therefore, we're still in a starvation state, and our body is cutting down or it's destroying itself to try to make up for this lack of glucose. So this is very dangerous because we are now losing weight and we still have no energy. So then our liver is going to create ketones to try to bring glucose up to the brain, because that's when our brain starts losing, or our body starts running out of glucose completely, and so our body now creates ketones. This is going to lead to weight loss, and that's metabolic acidosis, and increase our hunger and eating. So we have no energy, so we're going to be hungry, and that's going to continually raise our blood glucose. But that's not going to help us with our energy problem because we are not producing insulin, and this is going to be called polyphagia. And this is extremely dangerous because now we're eating more. Our blood glucose is continually rising because we're putting in a lot of glucose in our body without having insulin, so we cannot do anything with this glucose other than get rid of it through urine. So the damage of too much fatty acid metabolism and ketones, this results as hyperglycemia. So hyper means raised or above, and then glycemia, so it's pretty much in the blood. So this can lead to poor circulation, which would be like heart attack, stroke, infection, blindness, and liver and kidney failure. So now let's look at hypoglycemia. So what happens if the opposite happens? Because we're on a scale. What happens if we shoot too low? So this is going to be more immediate consequence. Hyperglycemia is more long-term effects. It damages our organs, and it's like we're in a prolonged state of fasting, which is like starving ourselves. It's really dangerous. And that's more than hyperglycemia is more of the place where we're going to find diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. Hypoglycemia, so let's say we take an injection of insulin, our medicine, and we bolus too much or we give too much. Well, our blood sugar will drop because we have too much insulin. So glucagon raises our blood sugar, insulin lowers our blood sugar in the blood, our glucose in the blood. So if our blood sugar drops below a certain level, we're going to have hypoglycemia, which means that we will have actually no glucose in the blood or not enough glucose in the blood to even operate our body. So our body will then start shutting down because it'll actually have no glucose. So for hypoglycemia, we would need to eat, and our body will start to shut down. We'll go into hypoglycemic shock, which is a very dangerous, it's like a diabetic coma, in which this is probably the more immediate danger to diabetes and causes most of the deaths. So we have hypoglycemia, which is a low glucose concentration in the blood, and we have hyperglycemia, which is a elevated level of glucose in the blood. So very cool. I think I have one more thing to share, but yeah, it's a dangerous system. But our blood sugar always continues to rise and come up and come down. As a diabetic, it's important to maintain your blood glucose control with insulin, the right amount of insulin, and diet. So you need to have a candy bar on hand just in case you over bolus. And so yeah, cool. Thank you guys for watching and tuning in. I'll go over a video on type 2 diabetes soon enough.